Okay, gentlemen, like I
that word
said,
gentleman.
what's that?
You like that word gentleman.
Well,
Uses it very loosely.
we'll let that go with the loosely in this part. As of this point, what we're going to do tonight, we were supposed to have a guest speaker. He cannot make it. Other issues he's having, which is fine. So tonight we're going to talk about some of the history of Semper Fidelis. I'm glad Howard is here. He can fill in some blanks that I've been trying to find, maybe. I don't expect this to last more than 20 minutes. But at this point, like we did last time, let's try to keep the outside noise to a minimum because we are recording this. Besides Howard, who can tell me when the first meeting of Semper Fidelis was?
1947.
46. December 23rd, 1946. Which means right before Christmas next year will be our 75th anniversary. The first meeting of Semper Fidelis Lodge under dispensation was held on Monday, December 23rd, 1946. Some of the highlights. The three principal officers were Master George C. Favell, Jr., Senior Warden Joseph R. Foster, Junior Warden were James G. Crouch. They're designated in the dispensation. Treasurer, Secretary were elected at that meeting, and the Master proceeded to make the rest of the appointments. So the following motions were adopted: to hold regular meetings at 7:30 p.m. on the second and fourth Wednesdays of each month. Howard, do you know that that's ever changed?
Never changed. And the first meeting they had was at George Favell's home in Terror Terrace.
Correct. So the first time it changed, you sure? The first time it changed was when we changed it to 7 o'clock here this last year. Semper Fidelis operated under dispensation until April 16th of 1947, about 15 weeks. So Grand Lodge used to meet earlier in the year. Now they meet
in April.
Now they meet in September.
Right.
So that's why it's that length of time instead of going to September like it would be now. They originally designated the meetings as special and regular. This is our current designations of emergent and stated. Just kind of going through some of this. In February of 1947, Brother J.F. Lowry presented the lodge a set of fellowcraft pillars, which he personally crafted. I've looked and I've looked. I can not find out. I believe these are the ones we still use today.
They're the ones we still use today, Jason, but Jim's, Rick Robinson, when he was master, he took them home and painted them, and they, the way they look now. They look kind of shabby in the late 90s.
Well, they were 50 years old. I mean, I can't
I
complain
don't
too
look
much.
shabby. I'm over 50.
We'll talk about that later.
Okay.
So as we continued, where is this at real quick? The business committee conducted at March 20th meeting was to approve a bill from Miss Reba Williams in the amount of $202. This was for the dinner served to the 105 Masons present at the March 14th meeting. Keep that in mind. At one time, there was 105 brothers sitting in lodge in our lodge. Not in our lodge building, but in our lodge since it's been created. The April 9th meeting, the rent committee reported that they agreed to $50 per month to meet with the Camp Lejeune Masonic Club to use their lodge hall for rent. It was constituted under a special communication on May 5th, 1947. Wrong side. There were 81 visitors and 37 members present at that meeting. Our first set of bylaws was adopted on May 14th, 1947. This is something that I found interesting, and I don't know, and I can't find when we got away from it. After every regular communication, a pamphlet known as Semper Fidelis Herald will be published and mailed to each brother of the lodge. This was to give notice of everything that had happened since the last one that was there. I found where it was given that we start this quarterly, but not much past that. If you read in your history, that's what the top used to look like. Kind of going through the chart here, kind of specifically long. A Bible was presented by Brother Roger Kirk on behalf of the Washington Memorial Bible Association, and the names of the charter members were inscribed therein. Let's see. The first honorary member, Howard, do you know this one?
No.
Most Worshipful Brother William J. Bundy.
No, I never met him.
I can't even put a face to it, and I've seen all of the Grandmaster pictures, and I can't even put a face with him.
He had to be Grandmaster in the 46, 47 time frame.
That's what it is, but I can't even put a face with him, even with that.
No, that was before your time.
It's a long way before my time. Let's see. A motion was passed at the October 8th meeting. Terry, this will affect you. For Semper Fidelis to co-sponsor the chapter of Demolay, which was formed by Lafayette Lodge number 83, and the motion carried. That is actually from our minutes. I went back and looked at this after reading and retyping our history, and that's exactly how it's put in the minutes. When the letters patent of perpetual constitution was received, it read, on the 23rd day of June, 1947, authority was given to Lafayette Lodge number 83 and Semper Fidelis Lodge number 680. So that's when our Demolay was
Does it
founded.
say by chance who the chapter dad was?
Not in here, it doesn't. I was trying to find that earlier as well. We have to go through the minutes for Demolay as well. Something I would like to do here soon.
What was the year that was done?
1947.
Okay. So we weren't meeting at Lafayette yet at that time.
No, actually, we're about to go to Lafayette here in just a minute. So the rest of the first quarter century, they had, for a very long time, Semper Fidelis had a very rich history of degree work, raising 20 plus people a year for a very long time. In February of 1948, a member of Lafayette number 83, the Honorable H.M. Eastwood, who was the mayor of Jacksonville, had the honor and pleasure of a visit. So in March 24th, remember I talked about the Semper Fidelis Herald? In 1948, so published monthly, containing news of the lodge and to be mailed out to all members and honorary members of the lodge and to the brethren of the lodge or master shall direct. So that's where it is. Howard, question, do you know when we changed it from the Herald to the Trestle Board?
Yeah, it was changed from the Herald to the Trestle Board, probably in the mid 60s. And I can't think of the guy's name that did it, but he was the editor of it for quite a while.
Go ahead, Howard, sorry.
And after once they started meeting regularly, they started meeting there was a big room above the 7-Day store at Midway Park.
Correct.
And they met there for a couple of years until they got, Lafayette invited them to, or they were able to meet Lafayette on Wednesday night, and they paid rent for that. Lafayette let them use all their jewels and what have you.
With that, what he just said, a motion was passed on August 11th of 1948 to take advantage of an offer from Mr. Paul Wynn for a building to be used as a lodge hall. So they entered into a lease, and it's entered into the lodge and Mr. Paul Wynn. So they started rent in these new quarters. In January 1949, a short discussion of the prospect of locating a site for our temple was conducted. So this temple idea went on for a little while. It actually involved Lafayette for a little bit as well. It ended up being putting our lodge where it is now. So
Cecil Morris procured the lodge, land, and the building, and the whole thing, the land and the building, cost the lodge a grand total of $15,000.
correct.
Cecil had a construction company.
I did not know that. That's a
That's who our lodge hall is.
correct. Cecil Morton. I didn't know he had a construction company.
Yeah, Morton Construction.
I knew it was 15,000. I didn't know that. There's a lot of things that, like I said earlier, that are bits and pieces that we don't hear. Terry and I was actually talking about this last night. Some of the things around Jacksonville, why we have Stump Sound, why we have New River. It comes back to Semper Fidelis. So there are things that once you start looking into some of the minutes and start looking into some of the histories of our lodge, we've played quite a very large part in masonry in this part of the state. Our first master was later DDGM. He also held several other duties in masonry. We've had several of those, Howard being one of them as well. So for $800 in 1952, they purchased half an acre of land from Paul Wynn. So at the March 11th, 1953 meeting, a letter was read from the Grand Master ordering that Lafayette number 83 and Semper Fidelis 680 fix their fees for the degrees in masonry at $50. So some of the things that you hear when you go to Grand Lodge in the future.
It was $50 when I became a Mason.
But some of the things that you hear across the board is some of this. You hear a lot of people complaining what is and is not, permissible by Grand Lodge. This has happened in the past. So that's one of the things we have to remember. Brother W.S.C. Dobson made a motion that our lodge join with Lafayette Lodge for the purpose of building Masonic Temple. The motion carried. Worshipful Brother George Fayville, DDGM of the 8th Masonic District, made his official visitation on an emergent communication on 15 July 1953. Raised at this communication were brothers Tony Ray Deadman,
Tony Deadman, yeah.
James Huggins, and Robert Mayhood. On 12 August 1953, the chairman of the building committee reported that our committee had met with Lafayette, and Lafayette proposed that Semper Fidelis pay $3,500 for half interest in their lot. A motion was made to reject this proposal. Again, something around the district, around the county. At the 10 February 1954 meeting, a motion was passed that our lodge join with Lafayette 83 and Seaside 429 in securing jewels for the officers of Richlands Lodge 564. So their jewels from 1954 were a gift from the rest of the county. So on the 24 March 1954 meeting, the trustees were empowered to purchase a lot in Jacksonville at the cost of $1,000. So the Piney Green lot, the original one from Brother Wynn, was sold back to him for $800 plus 6% interest. So where's the next one? I just lost my place. I'm working on it. Hold on. On 2 January 1957, Semper Fidelis held its first past master's degree. First time this happened at Semper Fidelis.
That still wasn't in our building yet, Jason.
No, it's not. At this point, they're meeting.
Lafayette.
I think so. So our annual Past Master Widows and Awards Night. In 1957, they held it at Cowell Memorial Auditorium at Jacksonville City Hall. There were about 200 people present to see the lodge pay honor to Worship Brother George Fable. He was, of course, the first master of our lodge. He was the past district deputy grand master of the 8th Masonic District. And
also certified lecturer.
I say certified lecturer, a Scottish Rite Knight, commander of the Royal Court of Honor, and a past high priest of the Onslow chapter number 94 Royal Archmasons. So he'd done quite a bit. So 200 people at our Widows Night in 1957. In 1957, the average attendance was 34 Master Masons per meeting. They had 16 initiations, 24 advancement, and 32 raisings. Total membership of Semper Fidelis at the end of 1957 was 255. In 1957, they elected its first life member, Worship Brother George Fable. So in 1959, at their Past Master Widows and Awards Night, held on 1 April, there were 53 members and 74 visitors present. So on 8 July 1959, a resolution was adopted authorizing the trustees to borrow up to $10,000 for the purpose of constructing a lodge building. There was a motion with it. This allowed Worship Brother Roberts to purchase 100 seats for the lodge at the cost of $3 a seat. On 28 October 1959, at a stated communication, the master announced that a check should be issued in the amount of $2,500 payable to Forest Hill Subdivision for the lot on Henderson Drive. He appointed a temple erection committee consisting of Bushel Brothers George Roberts, Euston Williams, and Winston Dobson. So at 2:30 on 14 November 1959, at an emergent communication of the Grand Lodge, North Carolina, was convened at Lafayette Lodge in Jacksonville for the purpose of laying the cornerstone of the new Semper Fidelis Temple. So that's where our large building started.
Jason, when they laid the cornerstone, they also put in a time capsule.
What year was the time capsule removed and replaced? I remember that.
It was removed when we put the addition on, and that would have been 1990 or 91.
Okay.
We put a new time capsule. There's a sealed copper box.
And that's in the front corner of the building, correct?
Right below where it says the date, and the lodge was, yeah.
Okay, I lied. I guess that where I can't read. How about that? In 1960, Morton Construction Company, at 10 February 1960 meeting, it was announced that the physical move to the new temple would take place on Saturday morning, February 13th at 9 o'clock. The following Wednesday, 17 February 1960, we held our first meeting in our new temple. It was an emergent communication held for the purpose of passing to the degree of Fellowcraft brothers Enoch Blackburn, Herman Musick, and I'm butchering these names, Joe Rogers and Forrest Yop of our lodge, and William Leslie Core of Manchester number 12. That's out of Rhode Island. There was 100.
In relation to you on that Blackburn?
I don't believe so.
Maybe a lost uncle or something.
Yeah.
Do you have any family in this area that you know of?
No, my father moved here because of the Marine Corps from South Florida.
Okay. That'd be interesting to know if there is a long lost relation there.
Yeah.
So Semper Fidelis was formally dedicated by the Grand Lodge on 10 September 1960. Let's see, 1964. A motion was carried to approve a letter of consent by Semper Fidelis Lodge for the forming of a new lodge in Sneed's Ferry. Got stump sound now. The following month, Semper Fidelis voted to contribute excess furniture to Stump Sound Lodge. Among these items were steward staffs, a desk, 2 columns, the senior deacon staff, a canvas, and extra chairs. In 24 November 1965, the members approved a letter of consent to form a new lodge to be known as New River Lodge. On the 22nd of December, the lodge voted to allow New River Lodge under dispensation to use the lodge hall on Thursday evenings. There was a monthly charge of $25 to be paid in advance. This was for a period of 1 year. And I've been told that they met there quite a while after that. Let's see. They mailed out a $108 check to Oxford Orphanage on 21 May 1971. It was for a $10 cash gift to each of the 18 graduating seniors there at Oxford. So our lodge is at a pretty long history with our charities. Let's see, come out. On May of 1979, the Tom McCann Shoe Store in New River Shopping Center donated 323 pairs of shoes for the children at Oxford Orphanage.
The students at Oxford used to be quite a lot, the number was a lot higher back then. They didn't have the cottages, they met in dorms and they ate in a big chow hall. And since the number dwindled down, they went to the cottages and left the dorms, and they all eat in their own cottages in a family style atmosphere.
Not part of Semper Fidelis history, but if, I know Howard's been, I don't know about the other of you three, if you've not been to Oxford, we're trying to get to go. We're trying to get the ability up there to go as a lodge, as a group. One of my goals this year was to have an emergent communication at one of the homes. Thanks to everything we're going through right now, that's not been exactly possible. But it still would be a good idea at some time if you guys could go up there, get a tour. They normally have tours going through when they have their homecoming, but we don't know if they're having that yet this year. So in 1982, worship brother Gene Solomon, who was the master, acquired a flagpole from worship brother George Taylor of Richlands Lodge. It had originally come from Camp Lejeune. Gene had the pole scraped, sanded, and repainted. Worship brother Otis Tudor and his son Donald assisted in digging and pouring the foundation. Mr. Shirley Smith donated the service of his crane in erecting the flagpole.
Brethren, this flagpole was every bit of 50 foot high, and it was just humongous.
Hi, Frank.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay.
You remember earlier we said that the Grand Lodge had told us that to set our degrees for the charge for the degrees at $50. 1983, they voted to increase it from $50 to $100. So that's when that happened. January 5th, 1985, H. Lloyd Wilkerson was initiated as master of Semper Fidelis. Distinguished brothers were Most Worshipful Brother Fred Keeler, past Grand Master of the Grand Lodge of West Virginia. Most Worshipful Brother James Brewer, past Grand Master of the Grand Lodge of North Carolina. And Most Worshipful Brother Leslie Garner, past Grand Master of the Grand Lodge of North Carolina. This is, and I don't know how this works. Maybe Howard could tell me, because I actually don't know when I read this. Worshipful Brother Wilkerson, in turn, by special dispensation number 9, approved by the Grand Lodge of Idaho, installed Worshipful Brother Robert Cooper as senior warden of Idaho Lodge of Research number 85. How they do that from one point to another, or did he travel up there? Do you know?
Must have had requests from the Grand Lodge of Idaho to do that. It doesn't say where they did the installation. I would imagine it was in Idaho, and that this person that was installed was some relation to Lloyd. Either he served under Lloyd or with Lloyd, or was a relative of some sort.
So I looked and I couldn't find it, but that doesn't mean anything, because sometimes our minutes aren't exactly clearest from them.
Lloyd's first wife, Jeannie, was from Idaho.
Yes. So at the same meeting on 4 December 1985, Worship Brother Reynold Davenport Sr. presented the lodge a doorknob. The history of this knob and plate is as follows. About the turn of the century, the Grand Lodge erected a new building on Fayetteville Street in Raleigh. It was a multi-storied, and the basement and other lower floors were rented to commercial enterprises. The Grand Lodge retained only the top 2 floors for their own use. The top floor is a meeting hall where the annual communications and other gatherings were held. The floor below it contained the Grand Lodge offices. These 2 floors reportedly were embellished with a great deal of Masonic regalia and such. Each door had knobs and face like the one now on Semper Fidelis West Gate. Somewhere in mid-century, possibly around 1950, the Grand Lodge sold the Fayetteville Street building in preparation for building the present Grand Lodge offices on Glenwood Avenue, but continued to rent its quarters on Fayetteville Street until occupying its new building about 1957. During the 70s, the Fayetteville Street building underwent renovation, and the contractor, being a Mason, recognized the value of the Masonic items on the top 2 floors and preserved them. He was a friend of Charles Harris, past Grand Master, past Grand Secretary, and gave him several items. Worship Brother Harris, being a friend of Worship Brother Davenport, gave him a knob and plate from the old building. Worship Brother Davenport, in turn, gave them to Semper Fidelis Lodge in 1985.
I could give you a little history on Worship Brother Davenport if you like. He was the editor of the Carolina Mason for almost 15 years, and he worked for the Greyhound. It was a bus company here in town in Jacksonville, and he was also a DDGL.
So that tells you where the knocker or the doorknob came from. Worship Brother Herman Nickerson Jr. was installed in 1986. In 12 February, he presented to Worship Brother George Ekman a Masonic Brotherhood of the Blue Forget-Me-Not certificate, naming him a member of the Blue Forget-Me-Not Society. So in 1987, they met to purchase kitchen equipment. Stove, stainless steel pots, ladles. Go ahead, Howard.
The kitchen equipment was donated by the ladies of the Evening Star. All the equipment we remodeled in 2000, no, yeah, let me see. Yeah, 2000, 2001, the ladies donated all of the kitchen equipment.
So in 1987, a motion carried to purchase all back copies with holders of the Masonic short talk bulletins and describe to all future copies. Let's see. In 1989, a motion was passed to undertake construction of a 16-foot addition to the lodge to provide for space to accommodate the dining facility and lodge office. The cost of this project would be $45,000 exclusive of electrical. So during construction, a time capsule was placed behind the marker at the northeast corner. So Brother Curie performed the electrical at a reduced cost. In '92, he did some more electrical work without charge of the lodge. So
Jay was the first person I coached.
wow. Wow. There's a beautiful picture here of I know it's in black and white. I'm not sure back then they had color pictures. Ask Frank and Howard, they know.
In that picture.
What's that?
I'm in there.
Uh-huh. You sure are.
Who was master? I can't think of it. He was the master the year before I was. He was there. Carl Shear's in that picture.
Let's see. Rayford Love of Lafayette,
Right.
Donald House,
He was the master of Donald House. I couldn't think of his name.
Jerry Dale. Jerry
Yeah,
Dale was the master of that one.
He just passed away last year.
Bonner Jones of Richland. There was someone unknown, Sam Norman.
Norman was he was an elderly guy who loved to do any part and take part in the degrees. And I just was always hoping that if I got his age, I could do the same. But the one that's unknown is the contractor.
Huh. And so brother Howard Kahn crafted a trestle board, which he presented to the lodge for display near the south gate. Just so you guys, again, know where some of our stuff and some of the history of our lodge comes from. In March of 1990, no more smoking in the lodge hall. In 1991, Worshipful Brother Carl Sitter, a Medal of Honor recipient, was guest speaker at Semper Fidelis.
He was from Virginia, from Norfolk.
Our honorary member, Joe Bynum, made a video recording of the lodge property. We were graced to have as a visitor, most worshipful Brother Richard Fletcher, past Grand Master, Grand Lodge of Vermont, and Executive Secretary of the Masonic Services Association.
His son went through the degrees at our lodge.
Most worshipful Brother Pete Thomas was also a visitor in 91. Worshipful Brother Ed Clayton crafted a bookcase which he presented to the lodge library. Brother James Wise presented the lodge a rough ashlar and a smooth ashlar to be placed on the master's carpet.
Weesey.
Say again?
His name was Weesey.
Okay.
He passed away last year too.
Yeah,
Let's say
Jim
he-
Weezy.
He was almost as old as Frank.
Exactly.
Goodness. Oh, goodness. This is a basic history of our lodge up to 97. 92, the kitchen went to undergo a renovation. 94, the lodge elected Worshipful Brother Harold Ritchie to receive the title of past secretary. Semper Fidelis during these years were very active. We've gone through an incredible amount of change in our lodge. There's 1992.
Well, I was young. Thanks, Frank.
I was waiting on that one. Thank you, Frank. At least I didn't have to do it. I missed your Frank.
Hey, we're close.
I went right by it.
No, don't show it.
Why?
The original chairs we had in the lodge room were from the old Iwo Jima Theater. And then in 96, when Carl Shear was master of the lodge, we replaced them with the chairs that are in the lodge room now. And we sold the chairs that we had to New River Lodge.
That's what I was wondering. What happened to the old ones?
Yeah, I think we sold the whole batch of chairs for $300 to New River.
Well, that's what they bought them for. So we've had some incredible history come through our lodge. We've had generals come through our lodge. We've had an incredible amount of brethren who have done a lot in the fraternity, both in our lodge, in the district, in the state, and further. Frank and Howard are two of those. Terry, I know you recognize some of the names that were raised. That's some of the things that we're looking at. Very early in our history, there was a set of working tools donated by George Fable, I believe.
Which city are you looking at? We've got a set in the case in the dining room that was donated by Lloyd, and they came from the ruins of King Solomon's Temple. And then there's another set that was donated by Most Worshipful Charlie Lewis, and they came from India, and they're hand carved.
Correct. On 23 June 1948, Worshipful Brother George Fable presented a sterling silver square and compass to the lodge as a gift from Brother Paul Sherman of Wyoming Lodge. And it says the first master mason raised by our lodge, but he is in fact the first brother raised by my brain just stopped working. As courtesy to another lodge.
Could be the same set of square compasses we have on the Bible.
It very well may be. It's some of these little things like this. I would like to know where some of this stuff is. I want to dig a little bit more.
It's in the archives.
When's the last time you looked at our archives, Howard?
Oh, not that long ago, about 30 years.
Last century.
So
Before the internet.
wow. Think
Or
about
cell
that.
phones.
That's a legitimate story. Howard and I actually got to talking, and where this immense history in the lodge came from, this interest in our history. So Howard remembers a lot of it. Frank remembers a lot of it. We have a couple others. We've done a lot in our history. Like if people won't read this or wouldn't have talked to Howard, who would have known that we'd have had, this is the second time capsule we had. Next year, for our 75th year, I would like to see, and this is just something that would be cool to do, for several of us to get together and for an education for Lodge one night, actually present a lot of this. How many people know the story behind our columns?
Nothing but what you told me.
How many people know? So we have a chime that's on the back wall next to light switches. What do we use instead? Frank, what size round is that?
Was it?
What size round is that we use for the high 12 and low 12? That's behind the secretary's desk.
That's the 105, I believe.
If that's not something that says Semper Fidelis, I don't know what is. But how many people know?
Do you know we have another bell ringing system in the lodge?
It's on the back wall.
Right.
We used to use it for DMLA.
But how many people know? How many people know that we have another bell ringing system? But how many people know when we got that round? There are little things like that that I would suggest that we give something for our 75th anniversary. Howard has put in a lot of work to help redo this history, and we're going to request the children's home to publish and give out several copies of that. And so we can have an updated history. Lots of things that we've done, lots of things that people are going to lose if we don't start going through. Howard and I talked about, let's put some of this history out and show them some of the minutes. Let them read through some of the minutes themselves. Kind of hit the high points, kind of like we did tonight. It doesn't have to be very long. There were some individuals that are named inside of those of you who did receive it, the Lodge history, who are still around. That they used quite a bit of answers, questions and answers from them. So, like I said, just a thought. It's Howard's. Again, I don't have a whole lot of original thoughts, but it's something that I would like to see, especially this year. I've gone through as many of the minutes and as much as I can find. Our lodge has never shut down for more than a couple of meetings in its 74-year history until this March. So again, we're dealing with a new wave and a new phase in how we perform our rituals and how we do those things. So that's where this came from. Does anyone have any questions, if I can answer, or hey, Frank and Howard, who've been here through some of it. Anyone have any questions?
Nope.
I'm good to go.
Jeremy, Daniel?
I have a question, but it probably doesn't pertain to this education.
Let me stop the recording and then we can. Brethren, thanks for coming. And hold on a second.